Today's webinar, Never-Ending Referrals for Market Centers with MAPS coach, Steve Schlueter. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be available within 24 hours on the MAPS Fast Track YouTube channel. You may access the YouTube channel from your Zoom confirmation email, and we will also share the link in the chat momentarily. Currently, everyone's on mute. We do value group participation, so we ask that if you have any questions for your coach, please type them into the chat box below, and they will be addressed throughout the webinar. Following this meeting, if you have any questions about today's call or our coaching programs, please email us at fasttrack@kw.com. That is fasttrack@kw.com. That's all for me, Steve. Take it away.
Hey, thank you, Rodrigo. Appreciate that. All right. Hey, folks, welcome. Thanks for tuning in today. And we're going to give it just a moment while folks are tuning in or getting logged in to join the program. And while we're hanging around, let's hear a few ahas from Mega Leadership. What's sticking with you guys who were there after you come back? What are you implementing? Feel free to unmute yourself, be part of the conversation. All right, we'll get started in just a second. So nobody's got an aha from Mega Leadership? All right, and if there's any way you can come on camera, I would love to have your pearlies joining us here and have a participating conversation where we kind of get in this together and explore opportunities. All right, Rodrigo, we've got the recording going. Okay, good job. We'll send out the recording afterwards. All right, folks, we're going to get started. My name's Steve Schlueter. Thanks for being with us today. And today, a couple of things we're going to discuss, and I would love to have a discussion. And so feel free to raise your hand, chime in, unmute yourself, jump into the fray, if you will, a little bit. And just a little bit about my background, just to get started. My name's Steve Schlueter. Have a couple of different roles at Keller Williams. I'm the operator of 2 market centers in the Austin suburbs, and I'm a bold coach. Have the privilege of being the group coach with Tammi for Never-Ending Referrals. I live in San Antonio, Texas, where I also serve as the title is Executive Director of Agent Experience, whatever that is. And it's primarily over production. And we've got a 900 agent market center, and I'm over our coaching program and other initiatives that we're putting in place to really drive productivity in the agent experience in our market center. So, really living in the same, I think most of you here on the meeting today are actually productivity coaches in nature. And so living in your world every day and what we're doing to help our agents get to higher levels of productivity. Prior to these roles, I happen to be was one of the top 20 RE/MAX agents in the state of Texas. Prior to Gary Keller hiring me as a team leader for the Austin Northwest Market Center. So I spent 4.5 years with Gary Keller as my operating principal. During that time, our team was ranked by Real Trends as having the 4th highest producing real estate office in the United States in terms of units. So kind of my jam has always been productivity. How do we make our agents, I guess we don't make them, how do we aid our agents in being more successful and really be their guide on that journey? So that being said, we'll get to work here. And let me tell you a little bit about the objective of today's call. If you attended Mega Leadership, you heard a lot about the RISE program. You heard a lot about the dependent model and these new directions that we're kind of going. And I would love to have a little conversation around this before I get into sharing with you a little bit more about our product called Never-Ending Referrals that you can take right into your market center. Never-Ending Referrals has been a group coaching program, one of the most successful group coaching programs with MAPS since we launched it in 2014. And it's in its fourth ideation right now. And we actually have an addition that you can bring right into your market center to drive database adoption. And we know how much of a challenge that can be at times. But I want to go back to mega leadership this past week. And we talked a lot about RISE and implementing RISE in our market centers. And I want you to know that we are implementing RISE in our market centers. And it's an interesting values conundrum for me, because I don't know if you're like me or not. And that is, for me, the thought of creating a dependency for agents is almost anti my being. We've always talked about this thing, businesses worth owning, careers worth having. And when I think about this, often I don't think of dependency as being, a business worth owning or a career worth having. And yet it has its place. And we'll talk about its place. And yet at the same time, it's how, I love, it was Nikki from Austin, from Houston Southwest, who shared, I've got some really capable agents and I'm working to teach them to fish. And yet some of them just need a fish right now. And until if they don't get that fish now, they may not be around to fish later. And so I think about that and I'm going, okay, so this is where the opportunity, may really reside for a lot of our associates. It is that these ones that they've got the potential, and how do we get them through to right now? And yet, how do we make sure that they don't stay in a dependent state? How do we get them to this place where they really have a thriving career? The one where they get to wake up on January 1st and they know where their first 24, 48, 72 transactions are coming from because they built a business that way. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts before we get into some of the solutions to make sure that we aren't just creating, dependency, and now it's dependent upon us to make sure that the agents have all the appointments and all the leads that they need, that we're actually building an army of folks that now have more relationships, that they own those relationships forever, or your program owns those relationships forever. And we stop paying, for leads down the road. And what are your thoughts about implementing this in your market center? I'd like to hear from a few of you and kind of what the thinking is around this before we get into talking about what I'd like to share with you in terms of an opportunity to make sure we're creating those careers worth having. Who's going to chime in?
It's Jana Ward here.
Hey, Jana.
Hey, I'm from the Plano office, and I was at the masterminds last week, or the leadership. One thing we've gotten clarity on is this is just going to be one piece of their entire lead generation models. So we're going to push it like that. Your first thing is to hit your sphere of influence. Your second thing will be, open houses, the farming, et cetera, like that. There is an opportunity for you to earn leads through RISE. It's not guaranteed. We're not handing out to everybody.
Yeah, I love that.
And we're going to put a time limit on it. You can, depending on your performance, if you're not hitting those leads, you leave the program, within 30 days.
Wow.
The maximum I'd like to do with it is 6 months as the head coach. So putting a limit on it makes them have to use other resources to get their leads, and thus the dependency is short-lived.
I love that, Jana. I mean, that's the spirit of, I think, our culture, right? Is that, let's give them an assist, let's give them a little boost. And the earning part I love of that, Jana, is that it's almost like a 30, 60, 90 to the program. We're going to evaluate it, and they look at their dashboard, make sure they're performing, and they're going to earn the right, maybe every week, maybe not even every 30 days, because you can screw up the algorithms pretty fast, right?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you for sharing. I think that's awesome.
You're very welcome.
Somebody else, what's your thoughts around this? What are you thinking, and what are y'all implementing? All right, we're internal processing. You want to hear what we're going to talk about. So thank you. Jana jumped to the fray. Appreciate that. I think you really nailed it, Jana. I think that's the opportunity. I mean, that's where you put this. This is where that fits. And so I think the caution is to make sure that we don't get so caught up in that we're losing sight of the fundamentals that you were talking about, Jana, that will build those sustainable careers that we ultimately want these folks to have. And so let me share with you a little background about Never Ending Referrals and kind of where it started, and what it can do for your market center and how you implement it in your market center. And so if we backtrack, to the Great Recession here about 2008, Gary had just finished the Shift book, and Gary asked Tony DeCello to take the Shift book out on tour. It was essentially a Shift book roadshow or book tour. And we had a one-day Shift seminar, and Tony asked me to back him up. And, if some reason he couldn't get to a location. So Tony and I went out on those first Shift book tours together. And we started off in Chicago. We were at the Chicago Marriott O'Hare. And our very first shift class. In the afternoon, we got to the section on relationships on database, and we had a room of 700 people. And out of that 700 people, we got to a point where Tony asked the questions of the audience. He said, how many of you are touching your MET database, is what MREA calls it, right? Your MET database 28 to 33 times a year. It could be in any way, direct mail, phone call, email, personal contact, at least 28 to 33 times a year, you're touching them. So put in the chat, if you will, what percentage of the room you think stood up when Tony asked the question? Room of 700 agents hungry to shift, hungry to navigate the market. What percentage do you think stood up? Amy says 1%, Jana less than 10, Sherry 10. Here's the interesting thing. It was about 15% of the room stood up. And so 15% of the room stood up. 20 says Debbie. And then Tony said, I want you to remain standing. And he said, of you folks standing, he said, how many of you included in your 28 to 33 touches with your database is at least 4 personal contacts, either over the phone or face-to-face? And guys, the room that day dropped from 15% standing to 3% standing. And Tony and I looked at each other, and we coined this the 3% crisis. We said, this is a problem. These folks are going to struggle to succeed because they're ignoring their number one business asset, their number one resource, which is their relationships. And we've seen it all in the NAR studies, right? The number of sellers and buyers who say they would work with their agent again versus the number it do. And it's because agents don't stay in touch. Well, and here was the challenge. Tony and I tested this room after room, month after month, and regrettably year after year, or I should say, unfortunately, year after year. And the number kept showing up 3%, 3%, 3%. And Tony and I would discuss this, and we said, we've got to find a solution to this. And then the solution really wasn't apparent. And it didn't really reveal itself till about 2013. And what I realized was I was in a bold room, and at this point we had it was 2013. We launched Bold in 2009. I had a number of people in the room that had taken Bold 3 or 4 times, 90 people in the room, and probably 40% had taken it at least once before. And I said, how? And there was one slide around database in lesson 4 or session 4 of Bold, and it talked about call two people by last name, and you talk to your database 4 times a year. And it seemed like a really elegant little system. And I said, how many of you are doing this that have taken Bold before? In a room of 90 people, it was 0. The next city, 0, the next city, 0. And, I had this epiphany. Tony and I were having a mentoring call, and I said, my epiphany is we have a bold law that says people grow into the conversations you have around them. And I said, we're not having the conversation around people in working their most important business asset, their database, how to have the conversations that add value, that create connection, that really work to deepen relationships and get people to really trust you. And rather than being Steve the realtor, you become Steve their realtor. And this is when we invented DTD2. You may have heard of it if you've taken Bold or taken Never Ending Referrals. And we launched this thing. We created this conversation called DTD2, or Doing the Database 2, in my market centers. And then from there, we built that into a group coaching program called Never Ending Referrals, that since 2014 has been one of the top selling programs participating in. And then what we actually did in 2019 is we took our content, our database content from Never Ending Referrals, and we donated about 30% of it to Bold. So right now, if you take Bold, the database content that you'll experience in there, about 85% of what's in there, 90%, 85%, actually comes from Never Ending Referrals, or was curated by my co-coach Tammi Juengst and I for Bold. Now, it's only about 30% of the content of Never Ending Referrals, because this is a program that goes really deep on giving people the model systems, options to and strategies to really be effective with their database. So, that being said, and here's the thing, I don't know if you noticed this. I mean, if y'all were to guess right now what percentage of your agents in your market center, it's not just in your program, put in the chat, what if you were to do that informal little study today, how many of you are touching your relationships 4 times a year, quarterly, over the phone or face to face? What percentage of the agents you think are doing that in your market center today? Put it in chat. Open that chat button, folks. What do you got? Whole market center, probably 4%, 3%, says Debbie. So I'm not alone in understanding that this is a chronic problem. This is a crisis in our market centers, 3%. And by the way, if we don't fix it, here's what I want you to know. In the future, we are then setting we're setting up a situation where the consumer, if they don't have a relationship with somebody, they will ultimately have a relationship with this. And this will become the solution to finding all their problems. Now, they want to have a relationship with this, and they would love for it to be connected to a person on the other end. And I know that Keller Williams, is fast and furious building the consumer-facing thing, so that as long as our agents are having, the conversations with their database, they'll have the interactivity here. And yet, if there's not a relationship established, and the only way that's going to happen is at the market center level, we have to start having this conversation over and over again. It has to become part of the weekly conversation. And that's why we built DTD2, Do the Database 2, is something as a weekly conversation that you have in the market center. If you're not familiar with that, I'll brief you on that a little bit. But here's one of the challenges. Agents have become conditioned, and we did it to ourselves. We go back to classic Bold, and agents were conditioned to chase business. And it was to go chase the for sale by owner, to go chase the expired, to go knock on the door. And nothing wrong with any of those. If you don't have relationships established, you do have to go prospect. And by the way, we would always encourage you to go build a prospecting component into your business that's listing specific, that you can, like geo-farming, that something is listing specific you can do in high volume, because we know what listings mean to our business today. They are such a game changer for an agent's career and business. So we developed Never Ending Referrals, and then, as a coach, Tammi and I would have, as many as, 900 or 1,000 people enrolled for Never Ending Referrals, and we've got them on a webinar, and typically live, 300 or 400 max would show up for the live sessions, and then they go to the recordings, and here would be the challenge. We can't see if they're doing the work. And this is when we built the Market Center edition that is designed to be facilitated at the local market center level so that the work is being done, that you can see the progress that your associates are making and you can actually foster it. And then you start to create a community around these conversations, and it kind of becomes, this is the way we do it here. So Jana, you're pretty clear on the way we do it here is here's how you earn your way to this, and yet we want you to have this foundation in place so that when we give you a fish, number one, now that fish is going to hang around, its offspring is going to hang around forever in the way of referrals and repeat business, and we keep that business in your system. But let me walk you through what this is, and let me go ahead and go to screen share real quick. First, I'm going to walk you through what we teach in Never Ending Referrals. And so the 6 lessons in the Market Center edition of Never Ending Referrals, and by the way, each session at the Market Center level is 2.5 hours in length. And it's a video based, and it's got a lesson lab format. And the lab portion is led by the local market facilitator, and they've got a facilitator guide that walks them through exactly what to do. And by the way, each lab is introduced in the video, so it's very simple to implement. And what you'll find is that each video segment of a lesson is about an hour, at the hour 10 at the most, and yet you've got 2.5 hours in the class. That rest of that time is spent in agents actually practicing what they're learning, masterminding around what they're learning, so that this begins to actually work in their business. So in session 1, we get into setting the foundation. You've probably seen this in the emails we've sent you, and everything from how we're going to build their Never Ending Referrals GPS. We go through the gap analysis to identify their opportunity, teaching them how to use DTD2 and set up their technology. And we have the tech tutorials and everything that they can link to in their workbook. Session 2, we get into embracing their behavior. It seems that, there's every behavioral style has some kind of hang up around why it's difficult for them to succeed with their database. And it usually involves not being authentic. And so one of the things that we focus on here is, how do they succeed being their authentic self? Even a high assertive or even a high structured can do it if they have the right strategy. Session 3, we get into winning the positioning battle, which is marketing, and we get into business to business. It's a great tactic for growing their database. Client events in session 4. And we have all kinds of role models. We have clips from interviews of people that are doing this at the highest level, and we actually give them a playbook on how to go implement it. Session 5, geo-farming, the other database, and then we get into becoming that trusted advisor, all the MOFers, the way they position themselves to be seen and trusted and heard and listened to as the trusted advisor. In session 6, we take them through how to use video, really setting up their 36 or 40 touch, pulling it all together along with their GPS. So they have a GPS lab, they're 145. It's a 145 in Never Ending Referrals because it's the 4 laws of the database or the 4 priority. And then we actually get into their schedule. So those are the lessons of Never Ending Referrals. And let me take you to a different spot here. And I'm going to take you to our portal. Let's see if I can pull that up. So what happens when you enroll your Market Centers team in Never Ending Referrals? Whoever the facilitator is going to get access to this portal. And this is your Market Center portal. When you come in, it's got the various introductions, how to contact us. Here it gets into how do you facilitate this program. There's instructions for the facilitator, an introduction to the coaches. But here's where it starts. Here you go. Lesson 1, lesson 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are all right here. And let's just go to lesson 1 for a moment. So when you're getting ready to implement this in your market center, you're simply going to come into the portal. You'll click on session 1. And you'll notice here's the video, and you'll play the video straight from the portal. You'll just go to full screen, stream it right from here, and you're good to go. Now, by the way, all our video has been done by a professional cinematographer. It's all top quality, well done, and yet it's conversational. It doesn't feel overproduced, yet it's produced. Under each video, you find a summary of what's covered in that particular week. And you notice over here on the right, you've got all your downloads. You've got the session 1 workbook, the facilitator's guide, the DTD2 schedule and handout, the scorecard for the student, and a peer partner agreement. So all the documents you need for each session are right here. And of course, there's more documents in session 1 because we're giving them more resources to get them started. Now, you work straight from the portal. Everything you need's here. When you're done with lesson 1, you'll come back in here and you'll go to lesson 2, and everything you need is right there. There's your video. We have some supporting videos that you might want to run in a team meeting just to spur interest that we've got here as well. That can be accessed from the portal. That's a Keller classic right there. Gary actually had dark hair. How's that? And you'll notice the various resources you need for downloads are there as well. So let me take you out of here, and I'm going to take you back to the workbooks and resources and show you what that looks like. So if I go here, let's see what we've got here. So here's the workbook for session 2. And you'll see we're going right into review of the previous week. So you're going to debrief what happened since the previous week. This is designed to be 1 lesson a week over 6 weeks. We go through behavior. We get into debunking some myths around their behavior. And we get into some market of the moment scripts based upon your behavioral style. Forward and active listening, hit, this is part 2 of forward in this segment. And then we transition into social media and so on. Now, for you as the facilitator, you've got a facilitator's guide. And you'll notice that here at the beginning of the lesson, as you're clearing it out, it says, here are some questions to solicit involvement if needed. So when you go to ahas, they say, well, what about this? What are you holding on to from this experience? What did you glean? Then you're going to complete the scoreboard. Now you notice the first lab here is at the 14:25 mark, and the setup begins at 10:41, and it's a lab around behavior. And it tells you what to do to set up that lab. Session 4, we get into a session with active listening and acknowledging and validating. And prior to this, they would have seen a video clip with Kara Moll, who's the instructor of language of sales, who taught them how to build influence using acknowledging and validating. And then in their workbook, they will have a link to the entire interview that we did with Kara Moll, so they can go deeper on that subject. And then we've got another lab on social media. So all these, you'll see getting them in groups of 3 or 5 and giving them specific instructions on what to do. And we will have set this up, and yet we want to make sure as the facilitator, you're completely prepared to do this. And you'll note that each session has a one thing. We said, if you could just do one thing, make sure you do this thing, and you'll make progress each week in your business. And then because we know accountability is important, we do have a scorecard. There's a scorecard, and for you, a scoreboard at the front of the room. And what we're measuring in this program, folks, is more of what we might call lead measures versus lag measures. It's what are the activities that are going to lead to the long-term results that everyone really desires to have. And so what DTD group or the DTD2 group are they be calling that week? How many contacts did they make? How many referrals and or appointments did they generate? How many new contacts did they add to their database, and did they complete the one thing that was prescribed in their action items or homework? So that is never ending referrals for Market Center, essentially in a nutshell. And the investment to do this in your Market Center, when we've had a Market Center edition of this for about, I guess, 4 years, 5 years maybe now, and we had it as a subscription of $4.99 a month, and it was a 12-month commitment. During COVID, we kind of put it on a shelf because we really intend for it to be a Market Center driven, something you come into the Market Center and do because it's creating community and really to facilitate it well. So as we saw ourselves coming out of COVID, we went back into the studio and started filming again in July. And so, you know, it's completely up-to-date content. We have pulled in some of the classics that are still there, and then we've updated it. In fact, I'm going to be updating 2 of the scripts right now because interest rates have gone up so much. And the great thing about being this portal activated resource, I can update it in real time, and it's updated tomorrow. So we're really giving you something that is market of the moment, you know, right now, ready for you to go. The investment is now, we've changed the financial structure. We allow you to do it on a per use basis, and it's $1,398, which gives you access for 12 weeks. Now, if you want to run it twice in 12 weeks, you can run it twice in 12 weeks. We give you 12 weeks. It's a 6-week program. It's paid $466 a month over 3 months. And we actually zero-based it in our Market Center. We actually had 38 agents just take it, $49 per person. So that was, what was it, $1,862 that we generated in revenue, and it was a $1,398 investment. Or you can get an advertiser or a sponsor or somebody to supplement this if you chose, and you've got it for 12 weeks. If you have multiple Market Centers, we ask you to contact us at info@neverendingreferrals.com, and we'll get you the information on multi-Market Center delivery options. There is a discount for multi-Market Centers. The $1,398 is per Market Center participation, and it's designed for you to take this right into the Market Center. Most Market Centers that run this have typically run it at least twice a year. You know, Ken, the productivity coach, Austin Southwest, is saying his agents are telling him this would have been really good to even do pre-Ignite for the new agents, and yet it's not just a new agent product. So I'm going to stop now, and I think that's given you an overview of this opportunity so that we can keep the focus on, you know, building careers worth having people build relationship-based businesses. And our mission is to do just that. I struggle with the idea of creating dependency. I do believe in giving people support. So let me go to your questions right now. What do we have? Let's see, Carlos, is there a different program from the one 2 weeks ago, the webinar 2 weeks ago? Yeah, there are 2 different programs, Carlos. So we did an introduction 2 weeks ago on our Never Ending Referrals, which is our individual program for agents. And so an agent can take Never Ending Referrals individually for $39 a month. It's a 5-month commitment. And they come into our program. We've got people that have been with us for 2.5 years. We meet 3 times a month live on Mondays at noon Central. The difference in the programs is, it's again, I can't see, Carlos, if people are doing the work. I don't know if they're doing it. And by the way, 1 or 2 people in your Market Center who might be taking it, who have joined our group program, we're not creating a conversation in our Market Center about this. It may be something that they take, and there's no support system around them to keep having this conversation. What happens many times is they'll go through a market center program and then they'll join our community afterwards because they want to immerse in it. And yet what this does is it allows you to start creating that database culture at a really high level in the market center. I hope that answers your question. All right, so I'm going to open it up for Q&A. Let me see if I've got anything else in the chat. All right. Got it, he says. All right, what questions do you have, guys? Come on, what are your insights? Let's hear from you a little bit. Do I have the bashful group? Come on.
Okay, I'll ask a question.
Go, Debbie.
This is Debbie Morgan, Santa Clarita. I think the struggle I have is doing like command. I know, you know, this isn't command, but and uploading my designs and stuff like that. Do you help with that, or is this more just contacting, you know?
This is, it's a good question, and this is not that. In fact, Never Ending Referrals, you know, we have tech tutorials that we provide the student with in each section. Well, in each session when there's a tech related thing like setting up their tagging or grading their contacts in their database, and we take them through how to do all that in command. With regard to, are we doing designs and all of that in here? No. So that would really be, now what would be a smart thing to do, and what we've had people do, is when they get to the session on 36 Touch, they'll actually do a lab in their market center with their market center tech trainer on, okay, now we know what you want your 36 Touch to look like, and let's do a tech lab tomorrow and make sure you've got it fully implemented. So that becomes one of the opportunities, Debbie, as well.
Okay.
But it's not a tech class.
Okay.
It's really the thinking and the mindset around succeeding with relationships, which is really the things that agents struggle with so much.
Okay.
It's the soft skills. It's how to have the conversations, how to add value. Yeah. Did you say South Korea?
Santa Clarita.
Santa Clarita. I thought you said South Korea. I'm going, now that's a commitment being on today. So thank you.
You're welcome.
We do have a Keller Williams in South Korea, but that wasn't Debbie. All right. Any other questions, thoughts, or insights as we wrap up? I saw several people come in here in the last minute. I think we got a time zone, you know, difference there. I think you missed it by a little bit, and yet I'll have a recording of this go out to everybody who did register. Here we go. You know, and Carlos, he direct messaged me. He said, chasing expireds has me all over LA County. I'm looking to generate listings in my zip code. Will this or the other program help me with that? Now, of course, this is the Market Center program, Carlos, that's really designed to be, you know, focused on delivering it at the Market Center level. For an individual, you'd go to neverendingreferrals.com, the individual program, and sign up for that as an individual. And really where we're going to help you get listings is we do have that geo-farming session. You know, Gary Keller tells us that the things we as agents have to master are our relationships, our database, and at least one other strategy that's listing specific that we can do in high volume. And the challenge, and you just called it out, the challenge is the expireds are thin, and you're probably running all over LA County to do that. And you got to go, where can I get listings in high volume or prospect in high volume? And that would, geo-farming is probably one of the better opportunities. And here's the cool thing, it's a database. And there are strategies to working it that are predictable, that are influenceable, that when you do them, you're going to get great results. All right. Yeah, and PDAD, I'll be sending out a recording of this here probably this afternoon or tomorrow. So just keep a lookout for that. All right, anybody else have a question or thought? And otherwise we'll wrap up.
Well, I think they can also get it from title. You can go to your title reps and they can give you a farm area, 200 people that live right around you, and you don't have to go be chasing expireds. And
yeah, I love that. It didn't highlight who that was. Who was that?
That was Debbie again.
Oh, hi, Debbie. Yeah, and Debbie, you're right. And by the way, one of the things that we talk about in our geofarming segment of Never Ending Referrals is, at a minimum, neighbor. Do you know the 150 people around you, and start there if nowhere else, right?
Right.
Okay. Thank you. All right, guys, I want to just thank you all for tuning in today. And, if you have any questions, you can contact us. I'm going to put our email in here, info@neverendingreferrals.com. I think I got it spelled right. And then, of course, if you're interested in enrolling your market center, you can go to the MAPS coaching website. There's a link to the registration page if you want to find out more about that. And if your leadership or anybody has a question, you can reach out direct to me at stevess@kw.com. And, I'll be happy to schedule a 15-minute Zoom with your leadership to talk about bringing this into your market centers. And guys, it's the most important work we can do. If we're going to build careers, worth having, businesses worth owning, it's going to be in relationships. Because here's what I know. 30 years in this industry, what we're paying 38% for in terms of leads today. Does anybody want to guess what that lead's going to cost in 2 years? I'll put a guess. I'll bet 52% in 2 years. And so, think of this as short game to the long game. Wherever we get relationships and we can own those relationships, as individuals, as a team, as a business, is the most vital thing that we can do. And I would just really, in fact, I think I put those in. I didn't put it in to everyone. This is the most important work we can do. And it's going to take all of us to kind of bend the industry to build an army of database warriors who take mind share, and we don't lose it to the aggregators. And so I'll trust you'll be part of that journey. And if we can help you with that, that's what we're here to do. And I want to thank you for tuning in today, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you, folks.